here's Brody Brazil.
The voicemail line is open right now. In fact, it always is 24/7 at 833-4Brody. I listen to all of your calls, and I get to play the very best ones for you and respond to them here on the channel.
Hey, Brody. It's James calling from Hamden, Connecticut. I wanted to know how NHL GM Brody Brazil would build his hockey team. I wanted to know if you were interested in a certain style of play, whether it be physical versus finesse, whether or not you would try to focus on making certain you'd have a great goalie or a great forward core or a great D core.
Great everything.
And if there were a couple guys, say outside of like the top 30 NHL players, that you would choose to put on your team if you were given an expansion draft.
Some sleepers.
So again, just wanted to know how you, NHL GM Brody Brazil, would build your team. Thank you very much and have a good one. Bye.
James, thank you for the call. Great question. Tough question. I say that because I now work for an NHL team, and I'm just a media guy. Curtis Brown, my longtime co-host on television studio shows, used to say, I'm the hockey guy, you're just the TV guy. You stick to TV and I'll stick to hockey. I think the reason you're asking is because I've been around this enough and I have observed this enough to maybe have formed some of my own opinions on this or some of my own beliefs or just some experience that I see things working versus not working. And so you're kind of asking me to sum all of that up. So with that disclaimer, I'm not the expert here, but I do have some thoughts on this. Obviously, I wanted to make and respond to the voicemail in this video. I do have some general overarching thoughts. I'm not going to get into specifics like names and very detailed ideas, but I do have some general concepts of how I would build an NHL team. And I know you sent this voicemail in right around the time of free agency opening back up, but we can talk about this at the trade deadline. I think this is a year-round type video in terms of the concepts of a hockey team. Number one, I would avoid, in this day and age of the NHL, I would avoid being too top-heavy in contracts and in stardom. And I don't mean like you don't want star players, but what I'm saying is that in a hard salary cap league like the NHL, whether it's high $80 million or if it gets up to $90 million or wherever the salary cap is, I don't think you want 3 players taking up 40% of your team's salary. Like, it's great to have a Connor McDavid type, or you know what, I'll throw him in there and say the future Macklin Celebrini type. It is great to have that type of player, but you want more solid players, more, and I don't want to say like middle of the road players. And I really don't want to say, well, you don't want top 6 forwards. No, you do, or you don't want a, top 4D. You do, you kind of want to do. I think what really got exposed was when the Vegas Golden Knights had their expansion draft and picked a bunch of good players versus great players. Having some great players would be nice, but if you had a team full of really good players, your team over the long term would do quite well because your matchups are a lot more fair and balanced. When you look at line matching between, your top 3 versus your 4th line forwards, if you're more evened out, you're going to have sustained success in a game against the other team. There's something, I don't know, and no team has really ever got the chance to do it that way because, well, they don't have expansion drafts like that every year. Anyway, the point is, if you look at like the Florida Panthers, a great example. They don't have Connor McDavid. They don't have a Leon Draisaitl. They don't have some of those contracts that are absolutely through the roof. Well, maybe now they've got some interesting contracts. But that's the kind of team I think is going to win over and over. A solid team, more core players than superstar players. I think in the goalie tandem, it used to be the theme and the trend that maybe you'd have the man. You'd have the guy that would start 70 games per regular season and would carry you through the playoffs and could win a series by standing on their head for 3 or 4 games straight, 2 goals allowed in 4 total games, and playoffs are all about defense, and goaltending is obviously a huge part of that. I really think, though, that to survive a regular season, to get to even a playoff spot, to get to being competitive, you really need to have a balanced goalie tandem. Now, you'd preferably like to have a tandem where one of the two gets hot because you don't, in the playoffs, you don't want to have that question. You don't want to have a goalie controversy, goalie conundrum. You don't want to have well, I don't know who's going to start. You really don't even want it to be competition, but you want to know that you're number one in the playoffs, earned that spot of the postseason starts. But during the regular season, you want a tandem that balances itself out. You don't want anybody getting too rusty. You don't want anybody getting shelved for too long. Shelved, not shelled. But the point is you would rather prefer, I think, having a balanced tandem. Like if I said, here's two really good goalies or Sergei Bobrovsky, like having Bob on your team is very enticing, right? And it has a proven track record that it works. But I feel like without a complementary piece to that, you're not going to get to where Bob and all of his teams have got over the years. So a balanced goalie tandem, I think, is more important than having a superstar goalie. Maybe that's obvious, but that's just one of my beliefs. Skill is great, but heavy skill is more durable. We saw this with, for example, the Edmonton Oilers of the last decade and all the draft picks of silky smooth forwards that scored a lot of goals or were supposed to, but maybe undersized, and they turned out fine in the NHL. But I think to a certain degree, if we're talking about the size of players, and it's always what you can have both, by the way. You don't need to have small and fast or big and strong. You can have something in the middle ground. You can have strong and fast, right? It doesn't have to be whatever. You understand my point. It doesn't have to be one or the other, small or big and fast or strong. It can be a hybrid of both. Skill is great, though, but I prefer heavy skill, a player that's going to be in the lineup for 77 games of a regular season and is going to be there for you in the postseason. If you've got a player who's constantly out, who's constantly missing games, what good is that player to you over the long term? So durability of players, also very important here. I also think that in a hard salary cap situation, by the way, I know kids will say, wait, no cap? Cap? No, I'm talking about salary cap. Kids. A hard cap, you need to make room, keep room for the deadline moves that you might want to make. Every good team down the stretch does something. And it's usually adding a piece. It's usually kind of fine-tuning their team and their roster. So you can't have it in December where you're maxed out to the cap and you need to make some sacrificial moves to clear cap space to then get what you need down the stretch after the trade deadline takes place. You've got to always be under the cap, I think. Like you can flirt with it, but you have to have room to do the things you want to do. I just believe that trade deadline, when it happens, is critical to teams down the stretch because at that point, you know what you have, you know what you've lost, you know what you need. And if you've got just a little bit of flexibility, if you've already got a good team and you're having a great season, please allow yourself that flexibility to go out and get even better, like pretty much every other team is going to do down the stretch. So I don't know if I broke any ground here or made any waves or told you anything that you didn't know, but those would be my fundamentals of running a successful NHL team. Would it work? Would I have any success? Probably not. But I just wanted to answer the question. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Also, thumbs up while you're down there. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel because I would love to see you back here next time.